Well, for a decade now, plans for HS2 have been in progress, with many people along the proposed route required to sell land and property. Now the second leg has been cancelled. Many will be asking whether they'll be compensated for the years of disruption and uncertainty. Let's go now to our communities correspondent, Darshna Soni, who's in the village of Madeley in Staffordshire, close to where the tracks of the now defunct West Midlands to Manchester leg would have been laid. Darshna.
The work that's been done so far on HS2 has caused a lot of heartache here, Kathy. People have had to leave their homes. Farmers have seen swathes of their land dug up. This is a beautiful, picturesque village in Staffordshire. It's not far from Crewe, where HS2 would have run to. Now, it has to be said that station is looking a bit grubby. It could have done with the investment, as many commuters there said to me today. Rishi Sunak did offer sweeteners for towns like Crewe and others across the Midlands and the North, but for his critics, those sweeteners weren't enough. This is what the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, had to say.
So what has been announced today is not a solution to the east-west bottleneck that we face on the railways in the north. It does not deliver that new line. It involves patching up existing lines and leaving us with a problem that still has not been fixed. So it doesn't work east-west.
But for many others in villages, including Madeley, today's announcement was welcome. They say their lives have been ruined over the last few years. I've been hearing some of their stories.
You can see the mess they've made of the ground.
Yeah. So all this used to be maize?
Maize and corn.
But there is no more maize. Bernard Kettle has farmed this land for 50 years. For the last 2, this muddy track has been churned through the middle by HS2 contractors. So they were building a tunnel?
Tunnel comes through here, through the field, and across those other fields, through round to Crewe. Where the white buildings are, the station's over there.
The farm is around 100 acres, and around 40 of those acres were compulsory purchased for HS2.
I always had an ambition to have my own farm, and this was the first one that I bought.
How do you feel when you see what they've done to your land, all the churned up fields?
It's the... I daren't say it.
Go on, say it.
How can I put it? The imbeciles I've been dealing with, who've got no common sense and don't understand farming. A plethora of experts, or an expert in nothing.
Even the driveway leading up to Mr. Kettle's front door was purchased, meaning he had to get a licence to get access to his own home. The farm is in the picturesque village of Madeley in Staffordshire. Residents have long campaigned against plans to build a twin-bore tunnel here for the line, arguing that even the initial work has had a huge impact on their community. Some of the houses here are sitting empty because they'd already been compulsory purchased. Families who'd lived here for decades had to pack up and leave to make way for a railway line that's just been cancelled. No wonder then that in the village hall we found today's announcement got this reaction.
And so I'm ending this long running saga.
Get in.
I am cancelling the rest of the HS2.
Yes!
Thank God for that.
What's the stress been like on the village whilst all of this has been going on?
I think the main thing is the compulsory purchase of land and housing. People who've lived in these houses for years that have been basically kicked out of their own homes.
What about people who are saying it's really disappointing and this isn't what levelling up is supposed to be about?
I think it is going to be difficult for some areas who are expecting a huge economic impact to come from it. But I think you've got to look at the bigger picture, and I think one of the things that he did say in the speech, which I think is right, is that it isn't really the London to Manchester links that were the problem. It's always been getting across the country.
The line would have gone on to nearby Crewe and then up to Manchester. Some commuters here told us it's in desperate need of an upgrade.
Crewe's an old town, needs new railways, it needs new infrastructure.
There's disappointment on what we could have had. But again, I've learned not to expect what we've promised.
So what will happen now to those whose land and homes have been compulsory purchased?
They're removing the welfare unit that's been here for the workmen.
A welfare unit, is that a toilet?
Yes.
The portable toilet was delivered just this morning for the HS2 contractors, but not long after Rishi Sunak's speech, it was driven away again. Mr. Kettle hasn't been told if and when he'll be able to buy his land back.
I'm just a number and a name on a chart, a statistic. I'm a farmer who owns some land in the middle of the train, in the way of the trainway.
The Department of Transport told us any property no longer required will be sold, and they'll engage fully with those communities affected.
Darshana Soni there. So let's have a look at the ditched HS2 plans. What's being shelved, what will remain, and how much has it all cost? Our data correspondent Kieran Jenkins has been looking at some of the numbers.
HS2 was meant to be transformative. It was supposed to look like this, a bold Y-shaped statement of great British ambition, a new high-speed rail line connecting London to Birmingham with Leeds in the east and Manchester in the northwest. And crucially, these high-speed trains, the idea was that they would go on their own line, and that would free up space on our creaking Victorian train lines, increasing capacity and reducing congestion across the existing network. Now, that concept came from Gordon Brown's government in 2010 with a projected cost of around £30 billion. It was approved by David Cameron's coalition government, although by then the costs were more like £37.5 billion. In 2020, work on the London to Birmingham section began. In 2021, under Boris Johnson, the levelling up Prime Minister, HS2 to Leeds was scrapped. And the costs, the latest estimates last month show the total cost that was left of HS2 then at about £71 billion, up to £45 billion, the most expensive bit on the London to Birmingham section, up to £7 billion on Birmingham to Crewe, up to £19 billion on Crewe to Manchester. Those costs all in 2019 money, so before the rampant inflation, which means they would actually have been far higher. So what's left of HS2 after Rishi Sunak's speech? Well, new high-speed rail in the south will switch on to non-high-speed rail on existing lines in the north. What was intended to be a Y-shaped statement of British boldness will instead end up as a relatively short section of very expensive track. Now, Rishi Sunak says he'll spend £36 billion, no longer earmarked for HS2, on new transport schemes instead. Much of that will go on filling in potholes in England. £8.3 billion, in fact, almost a quarter of the so-called HS2 money for new projects. But how new are these projects? Well, Rishi Sunak says he would upgrade the A1, a promise made by former Prime Minister David Cameron in 2010. Rishi Sunak says Bradford will have a new station, a station that was scrapped by Boris Johnson in 2021, reinstated by Liz Truss in 2022, scrapped again by Rishi Sunak himself last year, which is now reinstated. He's also promising £12 billion more connecting Liverpool and Manchester and full electrification between Manchester and Hull, which sounds awfully familiar to plans for Northern Powerhouse Rail, first announced in 2014. There are many more projects, including a new tram system, long mooted here in Leeds. Rishi Sunak says they will happen and they will be funded. But that's what they said about HS2.